But enough about that. Today I would like to talk to you about the war on drugs. And now, based on that brief introduction, I'm sure you can tell what my views are on the war on drugs. But regardless of your opinion, whether you think it's effective or not, the war on drugs has had a major impact on how we shape policy in the United States, from law enforcement to law enforcement policies, FDA regulations, immigration, and foreign policy, which are all topics I will cover in later speeches. But today I really just want to go in depth on the history of the war on drugs so you have proper context for my later speeches. Now, I'd like to start in the Prohibition era, as Prohibition is an excellent microcosm for the war on drugs. You see a lot of the issues that are present today within this 10-year span. Now, Prohibition started in 1920 and was started by religious groups that saw alcohol as immoral, and that led to domestic violence, political corruption, alcohol-related illnesses, which, granted, were all very true, and which gave a lot of traction for this movement to take off. However, they did not foresee the ramifications that this would have, most notably the effect that it had on organized crime, which was very small at the time, limited to gambling and prostitution. But Prohibition gave it an immense financial boost, as it could exploit the bootlegging market and grow these enterprises into much bigger things that they would have been if Prohibition had not happened. And while the 20s saw an unbelievable increase in economic prosperity, it also saw an increase in crime in all major American cities. This also led to the lack of enforcement of these Prohibition laws also led to mass police corruption. So, all in all, this was repealed in 1933, primarily due to the Great Depression, as, sales in alcohol would increase, would boost the U.S. economy. And let's face it, poor white people love to drink. But you know what white people don't like? That's right, minorities. And this fact was used by William Randolph Hearst, which used very poorly done studies linking violent crimes to marijuana, linking marijuana use to violent crimes, primarily in black and Hispanic communities, creating this fear and paranoia. Now, these studies didn't hold up to scientific scrutiny, but it was good enough for Congress to take very swift and immediate action, and they passed the 1937 Marijuana Tax Act. 1937, the Marijuana Tax Act went into effect, basically making marijuana, and in turn hemp, illegal. Now, that's very important because hemp was used as a much better product to make and facilitate the use of paper, which was a very big opponent to William Randolph Hearst's business, he was also in the paper business. So he effectively killed all of his competition with this fear and paranoia. But drugs wouldn't stay dead for long. Mere 6 years later, in 1943, Albert Hofmann, a Swiss chemist, synthesized the drug known as LSD, a hallucinogenic drug. And upon accidentally ingesting this, he decided to send it all across the world to psychiatrists and scientists to do further studies. And throughout the 40s and 50s, they saw immense breakthrough progress in the field of psychiatric studies with regard to mental illness, addiction, and all sorts of different things. But then hippies got their hands on it and basically kickstarted the counterculture revolution. And the last thing you want to do after taking a bunch of LSD is go fight in the jungle and kill people that you've never even met before, which was very problematic at the time, as we were embedded in this country. You might have heard of it, Vietnam. So the last thing the U.S. government was, a spread of these anti-war sentiments. So, in response to this, they created the Controlled Substance Act in 1971, essentially making all drugs, LSD, marijuana, cocaine, MDMA, all Schedule I felony substances, which, got these, which essentially killed the counterculture revolution. However, this information, unfortunately, did not spread to the country of Colombia. I don't know, maybe their education's just a little behind. I'm not too sure about that. But despite this lack of education, a poor peasant man by the name of Pablo Escobar rose the ranks and became one of the largest the largest drug trafficker in the world, and established major drug networks throughout the entire world. Now, this didn't sit right with the U.S. government, as they pumped massive amounts of money into the DEA to put an end to this, and rightly so. Pablo Escobar was a very bad person, was basically a narco-terrorist who caused countless deaths as a result of this, so needed to be put a stop to, but which the DEA did. With assistance from the DEA, the Colombian government was able to kill Pablo Escobar, and for most people, that's where the war on drugs ends, right? You know, Pablo Escobar is dead, you know, prosperity reigns, but that really wasn't the case, as all the major drug networks that he created really never went away and still exist to this day. And in 2016, there were 23,000 deaths as attributed to the war on drugs across Mexico and the southern United States, as described by International Business Times. Also, the United States is currently in the worst opioid epidemic in history. There are immense overpopulation in prisons as a result of primarily non-violent drug offenses. So yeah, the war on drugs is still a very prominent issue in our society today. But yeah, and I'll be getting into these topics in my later speeches. But yeah, hopefully this has been some helpful information. And thank you for listening.